Hello and welcome back. In the last lesson, you explored your Cloud9 workspace and ran the Rails server to boot up the Rails application for the first time. In this lesson, we're going to get familiar with the file tree and navigating through our development environment. First, we're going to check the path that we're in. To do that, go to your command line and type in pwd. pwd stands for print working directory, and then you hit return. Okay, so we see that this is the path that the Rails application is in, and our Rails application is called workspace. Okay, now what if we don't want to be in our Rails application? We want to be in our home directory, because since you're in the Rails application, you won't be able to start or create a new Rails app from this directory since you already have one. So to do that, which is you want to move up one directory, you type in cd space ... and hit return. Okay, now you see that you're no longer in the workspace directory, right? You're no longer in your Rails application. You see the workspace doesn't show up here. Now to verify that, type in pwd again and hit return. You see now you're in your home directory. Okay, so now to see what we have in our home directory, we type in ls and then hit return. Okay, so we see that we have a few directories here, including our Rails application, which is workspace. Now this is the default Rails application that came with the Cloud9 environment. Okay, now what if we want to move back into our Rails application so we can run the Rails server or do other things to it? To do that, which is you want to change directory into the workspace directory here, which is the Rails app. You type in cd, which is change directory, space, workspace, and hit return. Now you're back into your Rails application. Now to verify that, again, you can type in pwd, and there you go. Okay. But for this course, we're going to create other Rails applications. We're going to test out other code, and we're going to do that by experimenting with other Rails apps. Again, we're going to type in cd space ... Okay, then type in ls. So now in this home directory, we see workspace, we see test directory, and we see all of this. But if we look at the file tree here on the left, we don't see this. Okay, now that is because of the settings of the file tree. The default settings, if you click on this widget, it shows the root file system for your Rails application. So I want to see the home directory in my favorites. To do that, click on this show home in favorites option here. Okay, now you can see the test app, test directory, workspace, all show up here, just like this. But now we see this, and workspace is our Rails application, which is also listed below it under the root file system. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and click on the widget and click on this show root file system to uncheck it so we don't have the workspace app listed twice. So this is the view we're going to stick with for the rest of the course. Okay? So now we're free to create new test Rails applications. So for our first test Rails application, we'll follow directions from this great resource. This is called guides.rubyonrails.org/getting_started.html. And this basically walks you through creating a Rails application from scratch all the way to the end. I'm going to go through the first couple of steps and get you started, and then as a homework assignment, I want you to go through this entire guide on your own. You will run into issues. Don't worry, there will be things you will not understand, and that's completely okay too. The idea here is to get familiar with Rails and creating your first Rails application in its entirety. You'll also get a taste for routes, how information flows through the entire application from a browser request to rendering views, some basic authentication, and also posting and retrieving information from the database. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's scroll down. It walks you through some things we already know, creating a new Rails project, installing Rails, which we already have. We don't have to worry about that. Creating the blog application. So the first command is Rails new blog. So when you type in Rails new, it creates a new Rails template for you. Okay. And if we look at the workspace, we see that this template came default with our Cloud9 environment. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and do this. And whatever you put in after Rails new is the name of your application. Since we're going to follow this guide pretty much blindly, we're going to name it blog as well. So let's go ahead and copy this. And then let's just make sure we're in the home directory, which we are. And I'm going to clear this up a little bit. Hit Rails new blog and hit return. What it's doing here is running the bundle install to install all the gems that's required for the default Rails applications. I shouldn't say required, that comes with the default Rails application basically. It's creating all of these files. What it's doing here, if you look at all of these files, these are all part of a Rails application. And when you look at a template like the one it came with, all of these files came with the Cloud9 environment are basically getting created again for this new blog application that we just created. So let's see how far in we're in. Here it's resolving all the dependencies. And there you go, it's ready. So let's go ahead and clear this up a little bit. Now, if you click here, you see a very familiar file structure now. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go back to the guide and see what it says to do next. Okay, it's asking us to change directory into our blog. Okay, so let's do that. Now, if you type in ls here, you see blog is listed. So we're going to change directory into it. CD blog and hit return. And ls again, you see all of these listed here as well. Okay, let's go back to the guide. Here, it gives you some details on all the directories and folders and the files that got created when you typed in Rails new. I would encourage you to read through all of these, but for this application, the main things you're going to be working with are listed under app folder and under config routes. And whenever you run a migration, which we'll learn about later on during this guide, it's going to create the migrations and store them in this DB folder. So you'll get exposed to that as well. Okay, so let's see what they're asking us to do next. Okay, so it's asking us to run the Rails server. So let's go ahead and do that. Remember, from the cloud environment, the command to run the Rails server is slightly different than what is listed here. If you're working locally, then you can just type in Rails server. You can ignore this bin portion of it. So let's go Rails server space -b space $ caps IP space -p space $ port. Hit return. Okay, and it gives the address for where the server is running. We're going to go ahead and copy this. Okay, our application is running. Again, if you click on this application environment, it gives you some details about the environment. Your Ruby version, your Rails version, SQLite as the database, development environment. Okay, let's go back to our guide. It shows you that index page. Now it says we're going to say hello Rails. Okay, to get Rails saying hello, you need to create a minimum, a controller, and a view. Okay, read through this. I'm going to go ahead and copy this part which says Rails generate controller, welcome index. Now, this is where having two tabs or multiple, not tabs, two terminal windows or multiple terminal windows open. So we can actually have the server running in this window and go to a new window or create another window if you want by clicking on plus, this plus sign over here, and then new terminal, and then writing your Rails commands here. So one thing you have to be careful about. We were doing all our work here. This terminal window had been open from before. If you look at it, we're still in our workspace Rails app, which is not the app that we're working on right now. So we're gonna navigate out of this, cd space ... to move one directory up, type in ls, you see our blog app listed, so navigate back to blog by typing in change directory space blog. Okay, now we're going to run this command that we copied over. Okay, and it created a whole bunch of files for us. We see that it created a welcome controller. It created a route for it. It created a couple of views for it and some test files and other items that we don't really need to know about right now. But what's important is it created a welcome controller, it created the views, and it created a route. So if you go to app and then controllers, you see the welcome controller there. Okay, and since we specified here welcome controller index action, it actually created an index action for us. So basically there will be a corresponding view for that, and you see that when you click on views, you see a welcome folder and an index view. This is all Rails convention at work. Okay, so we're going to go back to the guide. It says navigate to the app views welcome index HTML ERB file in your text editor, delete all of the existing code in the file, replace it with the following single line of code. Okay, so let's do that. Copy this. So we are already in that file, and how do we get to that file? Under app, views, welcome, index.html.erb. We're going to delete all of, copy and delete all of this. I'm sorry, I mean highlight and delete all of this. Then Command V, then Command S. If you're working from Windows, you can just do Control S to save. Okay. Now it's saying we have made the controller in view. We need to tell Rails when we want Hello Rails to show up. So it says to navigate to the config/routes.rb file and then uncomment this root route. Okay, so let's do that. Config routes.rb and then uncomment this row. Command S to save. Go back. So let's see what that does. So our server is still running. Let's go to the application page since it's still running, and I'm going to just reload this page. There you go. Hello Rails. At this point, I want you to go through the rest of this guide by yourself. In the next lesson, we'll look at the model view controller diagram. Good luck on your homework assignment. I hope you're able to complete it, and I'll see you soon.